Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very special webinar all about the fatigued employee. My name is Zoe Sinclair, and for those of you who I haven't met before, I am founder and director of This Can Happen. We are really pleased to have you here today to talk about a subject which seems incredibly useful to many of you by the numbers that have signed up. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the person I'm having a chat with today, who is Daniel Fryer. Welcome, Daniel. And he is a psychotherapist and life coach. And we are really looking forward to having a chat. So, Daniel, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, fine. And you know what, I'm going to start off by saying that just before we went live, you and I were having a chat, and you said that you took last week off, but what happened when you had your week off?
I got ill. So instead of having a nice, relaxing, restful holiday, can't go anywhere, can't do anything. We're still under lockdown here in the UK, but I recently took over an allotment, and the plan was that I was going to go over there every day and do stuff out in nature, because nature is very good for you, especially if you're fatigued. But instead, I got fevers, chills, a headache, a weird toothache that had nothing to do with my teeth. I just decided to listen to my body. I spent 2 days in bed watching the rain and the hail. I don't feel accomplished, I don't feel relaxed, but it was my body just telling me I've had enough. I'm hoping that when I return to work, that my line manager will look upon me very kindly and give me a day or two off in lieu of the 2 days that I spent in bed, so that I can have some semblance of a break.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into our full conversation, I've got lots of questions that I want to ask you, but I just want to tell the audience how they can get involved. So we would love to hear questions from them. And in fact, many of them have sent in questions in advance, which I have written down in front of me. But for those of you who want to ask a question to Daniel, hopefully you can see a question box on your control panel, which is probably on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can't see a full open control panel, you might be able to see a little white arrow in an orange box. If you click on that, it will open up your control panel, and if you scroll down, you'll be able to see a question box. In that box, you can type in any question you want. It comes through totally anonymously, just to me. Nobody else can see the question that you have asked. So feel free to send in any questions or comments at any point during the session, and I will get to them and discuss with Daniel. So, Daniel, explain to me why so many of us, and I can absolutely put my hand up to this myself, why have we all got this general sense of fatigue at the moment?
I'd say it's all of us. We've now spent almost exactly a year under a pandemic, under a crisis. So we've all been in crisis mode for a year. Even the most calm and capable of us, to some degree, have been in crisis mode for a year. That's your body in its defense posture. So it's constantly pumping adrenaline and cortisol through your body because it's fighting a crisis. That's only meant to be a short-term solution to a short-term threat, not an ongoing circumstance. And that can only last for so long before we start to burn out. And as we've gone through the pandemic, and as we are constantly in crisis mode, at the same time, we've lost a lot of our normal ways of de-stressing. So we can't go on holiday. We can't go to pubs and bars and restaurants. We can't socialize as we normally did. And home has become this very weird space where it's not just the place where you relax, it's the place where you work, it's the place where you homeschool if you have children. So we're constantly pumped in red alert mode, whilst at the same time we've lost all our normal, natural, traditional ways of de-stressing and relaxing. And we are so all quite naturally at the end of our tether. I've lost your sound, unfortunately.
So, how can we, and I've already got 3 or 4 questions on this. So we have lost all those things. How can we still try and refresh?
2 things that will help with that are structure and a little bit of self-compassion. So try and structure your day and your night as much as possible. So if you're fatigued, your sleep pattern is probably disturbed. You might have even lost all sense of a normal sleep pattern. You'll go to bed when you feel like it. You'll get up when you feel like it. Try and normalize sleep as much as possible. So if you're an 8 hours a night person, and you favor getting up at 7, that means going to bed at 11 no matter what. And that it's called sleep hygiene. You're selecting 2 set points. I go to bed here, I get up here. A good night's sleep, better than anything, will help you to refresh. We all know it, but we don't do it. Tablets, smartphones, laptops, emails, social media, don't touch them a good 2 hours before bedtime. We all know that, but we don't do it. But it's having an impact. Not only are we still engaging our brain too late into the night, we're always on, but also the lights that emit from our screens are setting our hormones into awake mode. So we're trying to go to bed with our brains on alert, active, I'm still processing information mode, and our hormones are setting ourselves up to go to awake mode when we're trying to go to sleep. So easy to say, hard to do, but no devices, at least an hour, preferably 2 before bedtime. As you
sorry, carry on.
As you go through your day, try and make it as structured as possible. So start work at this point, end at that point. Doesn't even have to be your normal 7-hour day. Give yourself 5, but have a structured day. Take regular breaks. Do something with those breaks. Do something normal. Engineer a water cooler moment. So phone somebody and just have a natural conversation. Go outside. Spring is finally here. The weather is getting better. Nature is a good de-stressor. Go for a walk. Take yourself away from your desk, your computer, your home, your environment. Make it something that you can come back to after you've had a break. Also, just be kind to yourself. You are not going to be operating at peak efficiency, and nor should you.
Okay, so that's really useful. And actually, I'm going to take a step back because somebody's asked a really interesting question about actually how are we defining fatigue? What actually are we meaning by this? And I suppose we have to understand what that is to be able to recognize it in ourselves.
If you constantly feel tired, if you constantly have difficulty concentrating, if you feel disorientated, groggy, if you're more clumsy than usual, more irritable than usual, these are all signs of fatigue.
Is there a difference between fatigue and burnout, or are we really talking around the same thing?
Fatigue is part of burnout. So burnout syndrome wasn't even classified as a syndrome until 2017. And it's not a medical condition. It's more of an occupational phenomena. So it's something that applies directly to work. And if you're burning out, you have all the fatigue and the exhaustion, but you also feel distanced from your job, not engaged with the job that you would ordinarily feel engaged by, maybe even negative about it or cynical towards it. And as a result, your professional efficiency is going down rather than maintaining or improving.
Okay, so great. So a lot of people, lots of questions coming through here, and I'm going to start going through them soon. People are asking about would fatigue equate to a lack of motivation at work?
It could be. I mean, that it could belong to fatigue. It could belong to burnout. It actually belongs to all of us. Yes, if you're tired, you're going to feel less motivated. If you're burning out, you are going to feel less motivated. To be honest, all these things belong under stress. These are all different forms of stress. Stress is this catch-all term. For instance, we can actually have good stress. So if you are excited by work, if you thrive under the pressure of your deadline, that's a good kind of stress. Planning for holidays and weddings are good types of stress. The posh term for that is eustress, good stress. Bad stress is distress. And that covers a multitude of sins. So you can be anxious and distressed, angry, depressed. You can be demotivated. You can feel hopeless and helpless. You can have sleep problems, skin conditions, gut problems, all because of your stress. The health and safety executive, when it comes to work, has a very clear definition of work stress, but it actually applies right across the board. When the demands or the constraints of your situation exceed your ability to cope, good stress becomes bad stress. Well, I think life is all beginning to exceed our ability to cope.
Right, okay, yes, and I can see how, from the questions coming through, how this is a really big topic. So someone's just asked something really interesting. How do we differentiate from working really hard and burning out?
Well, if you're working really hard, but you feel buzzed, you feel motivated, you feel a sense of achievement and accomplishment, then that's just you working hard and doing something that you are excited by. If you are working hard, but you feel like you're like one of those swans that looks really graceful but is paddling furiously underneath, if you feel like you're working hard but you're demotivated or stressed, that's you in burnout mode. So it's not the working hard, it's how you feel about it.
Okay, so I'm going to be very honest with you, Daniel. It's all very well by saying we try and restrict our working hours. You know, we don't send emails at night, and we've all heard this. You know, we all know, and as you said at the beginning, we don't always practice it.
Yes.
But many of us are constrained by the expectations of our employers.
Absolutely.
And how can we bring about this change that would permit us to have the space to look after ourselves properly?
Well, I don't know how many people out there that are listening are employers rather than employees. If you are employers, for a little while, please lower your expectations of what you can expect from your workforce. I work partly for myself and partly in PAYE appointment in private healthcare. And I just recently had a performance review. We have one every year. And my manager laughed because as a team of therapists, we've all gone through the same review and we've all said exactly the same thing to exactly the same question. We were asked, what do you think your main achievement has been for the past year? And we've all gone, I'm still here. I'm still doing this job. I may not be at full capacity. I don't expect to be. I may not be hitting all my targets. I don't expect to. I'm here. That is my main achievement for the year. Nobody should be expected to be performing at optimum efficiency at this present time. That's for later on. So if you are an employer, don't expect, don't push. If you are an employee and they are expecting, just let them know. No, you're allowed to say, no, I can't do this. This is too much. I think I have done brilliantly. Thank you very much, considering what I've had to deal with this year. You are a human being. You can only take so much.
Yeah, but sometimes it can feel a bit scary to actually have to say that to your employer. So it's sometimes easier said than done. But I think there is a general feeling of this at the moment. So an employer or a line manager wouldn't necessarily feel surprised. I wouldn't be surprised because I think many line managers are probably feeling it themselves.
Absolutely.
So moving forward, how long? We've still got a long road ahead.
Yeah.
And so people are asking, how long can we expect these feelings of fatigue and or burnout to continue?
Unfortunately, for a little while longer. This is all about, I hate the term, micromanagement. We are not going to return to normal. Even with the vaccine, there's still a virus. We are returning to a new normal. But even if we return to normal tomorrow, you can't expect to go back to normal in yourself tomorrow. I was talking to a colleague, and she's noticed this, school gate phenomena. All the parents that were homeschooling are now dropping their children back off at the school gates, expecting to feel not just a measure of relief, but also a rush of energy because they're not homeschooling anymore. And instead, they're coming home and feeling even more depleted. But it's good. They've crisis managed to the point where the crisis is over, but your body doesn't suddenly go, yippee, crisis over, return to normal. You need to allow time for balance to be restored. And it's all about looking after yourself, setting that structure, yes, knowing when to take time out, not expecting yourself to perform at 100%, not even more than ever before, not expecting to get everything on your to-do list done by the end of the day. More importantly, not beating yourself up if you haven't, not worrying about what might happen if you don't. Because oddly, you're not alone. You are not the only person sitting there beating themselves up for not having got everything ticked off on the list, or worrying about what's going to happen the next day if they don't. We're all like that. And we all know that. And there is more support, more sympathy for that than we think there is. So don't do as much.
So I think you've come to a really interesting point here, Daniel, because I've got two different questions here. One's a comment to say, we sometimes assume our employers want us to be available all the time. We have to take ownership for ourselves and our well-being.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting comment, and I thank the person that has mentioned that. And somebody else has said, how do we balance all of this in an environment where there is pressure to work faster and harder? Many staff are in fear of losing their jobs.
They are. But ask yourself, how realistic is that fear? And again, if it is realistic, do you really want to be working there anyway? Isn't it maybe time to start prepping your CV for what's next, if that's the environment? But I always use this is from a personal experience many years ago. I got work. I was working in a customer publishing agency, very, very demanding. When I had the interview, the people interviewing me talked a lot about how it was a very relaxed, forward-thinking company. A lot of emphasis was put on maintaining a work-life balance. So I liked the sound of that. I took the job, and I very quickly sussed that none of that was true. And that everybody was expected to always go extra. People would work late even when they didn't have anything to do, because nobody liked to be seen to be the last one out of the door. Now, at the time, the creative director was responsible for sign-off on all the projects. So he used to take the work home, and the editorial head, the subhead, the production head, they were all used to getting phone calls late at night with his comments and corrections, and they were expected to come in first thing the next morning to action them. I got promoted to section editor for a group of titles, and I knew that this call was coming. So there's a bunch of stuff that I was responsible for. Lo and behold, my phone rang at like 10:45 at night. So I ignored it. And I went in the next day, and the boss went, "Can I have a word with you, please?" I went, yeah, sure. And he said, I called you last night. I went, yeah, I know you did. He went, well, you didn't pick up. And I went, no, I didn't. And he went, well, why didn't you? And I went, well, it was 10:45 at night. And he went, well, everybody else picks up. And I went, I know they do. I know. Let them. They can if they want. I never will. And his face fell, and he went, well, what do you want me to do with all my comments and corrections? I went, send me an email, and I'll pick them up when I come in the morning. And that's exactly what happened. Now, everybody else took the phone calls. I can't speak for them. It's not my job to advise them. That's the action I took for myself. Could he have said, do it or you're fired? Quite possibly. Is he allowed to do that? Sadly. Maybe not. Maybe I could have done him for unfair dismissal for phoning me at 10:45 at night. I just took constructive action for myself. I was very boundaried. You can ring me at 10:45 at night if you wish. I'm not going to pick that phone up. Now,
it takes a strong person to do that.
absolutely.
But I think somewhere something that many of us should take on board. I mean, someone has said, has it really taken a pandemic to start thinking about these things? So which I think is true. Moving on to questions, and I'm just trying to get, I've got those questions I want to ask you, but much more importantly, I've got all the questions that the audience are asking, so I really want to get to those. Somebody has said, do you think there's a risk of increased burnout when workplaces open more and there may be a push by employers to get their staff to return to office working after home working for nearly a year?
In some places and in some instances, yes, there is going to be that. There was a few stories a couple of weeks ago about how, the Canary Wharf environment, all the people there are expecting their employees to come back into being normal 9-to-5ers, mainly from their point of view, because there's a load of very expensive office real estate standing empty. But they're assuming that people do actually want to come back to work 9 to 5, and actually people don't. I think going back to work, there are going to be some difficult conversations on both sides. There's going to be a bit of negotiating on both sides. But an excuse before the pandemic for not working from home is that you wouldn't produce as much, or you wouldn't be as effective, or the logistics wouldn't allow it. Well, we've totally disapproved that. We've got everybody moved to working from home overnight, and it's by and large worked. So going back to work, you're armed. You've got proof. I can function as an employee at home, at work. I want more flexi time. I want more give and take. We've got the set.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. There's a lot of people that are agreeing with you, of course. It makes total sense. And a lot of people saying, well, not so many, but a few people saying, when you say, should you consider actually working there if that's the culture? Somebody says saying you should consider a new job is not easy. It's not really practical most of the time. Even ignoring the financial implications, it takes time and energy to apply for jobs people don't necessarily have, particularly in current circumstances. Yes. So I think it's about having those conversations and really deciding what's right for you.
Absolutely. There are factors. Now, some of those factors are real factors, actual influences on how you go about this. The culture you work for, the job market at the moment, the steps that you will need to take, the amount of time it would need to take to get you from that job to that job. These are all real. But there are also factors that are imaginary. There are fears playing on us. We are very good. As human beings, we're very, very good at focusing on the negative. We've actually got very, very disaster-orientated brains. It's a throwback to it's biology. Biologically speaking, we are still 10,000 years ago. We're living when we were living in hunter-gatherer societies. You break camp in the morning and you'd go out hunting and gathering. Well, at the end of the day, it might make sense, night, to talk about what a nice day you've had hunting, gathering, picking berries. But actually, as a survival mechanism, you needed to talk about the dangers. And I don't mean just dangers of don't go that way, quicksand, don't go that way, man-eating tigers. The future-focused dangers. I've noticed a change. The herd is leaving. There's going to be a drought. There's going to be a frost. We need to think about these things. It was survival. Well, our lives are a lot more comfortable than they were then, but we've still got those disaster-prone brains. So we start to imagine all the horrible things that could go wrong that aren't actually. So it helps to map out what's an actual factor pragmatically that I would have to deal with, and what's one that really does essentially exist in my imagination. It's a fear and it's unfounded. If you can remove those, then that allows you to release a lot of kind of like emotional energy to focus on the things that you do need to actually work out, the actual barriers to you getting what you need.
I think that's so important and actually enlightening for me. And put that in big bold letters on my sheet here. I think that's really interesting. So thank you for that. And I urge the audience to take that on board as well. Okay, so specifically, what can we do as individuals to reduce our stress, recover? Oh, sorry, it just jumped as I was recover and continue to manage whilst the new normal emerges.
Okay, back to structure, healthy sleep, being kind to yourself, allowing yourself to not be as proficient as you normally are, not beating yourself up for it. Also, because we're talking a lot about those fears, learning how to challenge those unfounded fears. So, for instance, let's say that I was really worried about this interview and I'm telling myself, oh my God, if it goes wrong, it's going to be awful. Well, that's a really stress-producing statement to feed myself. If this interview goes wrong, that's going to be awful. Well, I can challenge that on paper or in my head and go, okay, if it doesn't go how I want it to, it's not going to be awful. I won't like it, but it won't be awful. Immediately, I'm taking the pressure dial down. I've gone from awful, worst case scenario thinking, to bad but not awful, a more nuanced, balanced appraisal of the situation. And that allows me to contingency plan, and I can sketch out a contingency plan. So, if X, then Y. So I go, okay, well, if it starts to go bad, I make a mistake, maybe I can laugh it off. If somebody asks me a question and I can't answer it, I will promise to get back to them. So if you can sketch these little things out in detail, here's a thought that is disturbing me, here is a challenge to that thought, here's my contingency plan to that thought, you're bringing that pressure cooker down. Do that often enough, and eventually that kind of thinking becomes automatically. And that's something to do at the same time as you really just bring what structure you can to your life, and don't try to do it all. We are not meant to be stuck at home, working, running the house, homeschooling, safeguarding our mental health issues, and all of it at exactly the same time. Work out what you can do and do it, and really no more than that, unless there's a real need. So sometimes you have to step up to the plate for work. Not always.
Yeah, no, interesting. I've got a number of people asking that they wished all their team members were on this call, and is it being recorded? And I apologise, I should have said at the beginning, yes, it is being recorded and you will receive it so you can show it to members of your staff. So I hope that answers the questions that are coming in about that. Someone's asked a really interesting question about is there a way, sorry, more questions are coming in, so yeah, is there a way of training yourself to stop being so worried about the future in general? How can you clear your mind and control your thoughts?
Yes, awesome, brilliant question. I'm a rational emotive behavior therapist, REBT. That's a form of cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. Any of the CBT therapies train you how to challenge your thought processes, and they teach you it in a systematic way, how to take the thoughts that disturb you and challenge them effectively, whilst at the same time replacing them with a more effective, rational thought process. But you've also got things like mindfulness, which teaches you not so much to challenge your thoughts or clear your mind of all thoughts. The idea of mindfulness is that you kind of just step back and just view your thoughts without attaching meaning or labels to them. It's teaching you to be more present in the moment. Because as human beings, we're not very good at doing that. We're more likely to be anchored in the past, depressing ourselves over the things that have happened and can't be changed, or we're anchored in the future, worrying about all the stuff that hasn't happened yet. There's even therapies that combine the two, so you can get mindfulness-based CBT and mindfulness-based REBT that teach you to challenge the more disturbing thoughts, whilst at the same time teaching you how to anchor yourself in the present moment. But these things are, the posh terms, cognitive restructuring. It's a systematic way of changing the way you react to things for the better.
Okay, really interesting. REBT, that is, people asking, could I, if you want to look up more, it's REBT. So yeah, I'm sure Daniel will answer any questions on that if you want to send in any more about that. Someone has written in, I think it's quite difficult when you genuinely do enjoy your job, but are suffering with fatigue and burnout due to the current situation, causing a lack of interest and motivation for work. The guilt of feeling that way is an added pressure. So, you know, how can we how can this be dealt with? Someone asked.
Work on the guilt. It's okay, yeah. I mean, it's sad for us all. You know, if you're lucky enough to be a job that engages you, if you're lucky to be in a job that motivates and pushes you in a good way, great. And so yes, it's going to be horrible if you suddenly feel demotivated. But even if you're in a job that you don't like very, very much and you've got to do it and you still feel demotivated, that's not going to feel good. But unfortunately, that is kind of the way we are at the moment. As I said, we've just been on red alert for so long. We need time for our bodies to come back to equilibrium. But in the meantime, until that happens, that's the area to focus on. Why beat yourself up for something that is actually inevitable? Why beat yourself up for something that isn't actually your fault? It's not your fault that you're not productive. It's not your fault that you're not motivated. There is a pandemic on. Your body is literally in stress mode. That's nothing to do with you. That's been done to you in its external set of circumstances. So if you just drop the guilt, well, that's going to be better than having the demotivation and the guilt.
Excellent, thank you. I'm finding this personally so enlightening. So thank you, Daniel. I think there's a couple of people have asked about how do you prevent personal struggles, whether it's outside things not necessarily linked to the pandemic, affecting your work as well as feeling fatigued. So it's almost like, how can we teach ourselves to compartmentalize things that are going on in our life?
This is what all the kind of the REBT and the CBT therapy is about. The general ethos for these types of therapies are that it isn't the events in life that disturb you, it's what you tell yourself about those events that disturbs you. Personal challenges aren't going to go away. They're not going to put themselves on hold just because you've got a pandemic and a deadline. They are there. CBT and REBT says the problem isn't the problem is your attitude about the problem. And when you think in disturbed ways about life challenges and adversities, the way you think, feel and act isn't going to be rational or constructive. That's the important word. The way you think and feel and act will not be rational or constructive. However, in the face of the same challenge and adversity, if you change the way you think, the way you interpret it, then you will become more rational and constructive in the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you act. And that means that you will be able to affect the best solution for you, because we're all different. So everybody watching this could face exactly the same personal struggle, but if they interpret it in a rational way, the solutions would be different. The solutions would be what were best for them. Some people would be able to compartmentalize, some people would find another solution, some people another and another. But it's all about the interpretation. If you adopt a disturbing thought, you'll disturb yourself. If you adopt a more rational thought, you're going to be more rational.
So this is an interesting question. Someone has said their personal belief is that when it comes to people's thoughts and minds, many people tend to look for a very quick solution, but actually the real answer is that you can't change your mind unless you put in the consistent work of mindfulness or seeing a therapist or whatever it might be that works for you. Do you believe there can be quick solutions, or do you think it can only happen over a long period of time?
Oh, that actually depends on the person. Yes, whoever asked that question, they're absolutely right. I don't know if you've ever heard of the 4 stages of competency. It's a business tool, it's a therapy tool. Whenever we do something, we go very quickly, well, not very quickly, we go through 4 stages of competency. First of all, we have what we call unconscious incompetence. So you might have a deficit that you're not even aware of until you're confronted with it. And suddenly you realize, oh my God, there's this thing I can't do. That's unconscious incompetence. But let's say that it's something that you want to do. So you'll resolve to do it. You'll practice. Well, you're not going to be very good at it. That's conscious incompetence. You know you're not very good at this thing, but you're going to resolve to keep practicing, monitor your results because you want to get good at this thing. But with enough practice, you move into what we call conscious competence. You kind of know what you're doing. You do have to think about it, but you're more comfortable doing it. You're still working towards your goal. You're still monitoring your progress, but you're much better than you were. Well, keep that up and you'll move into the final stage, and that's unconscious competence. You can do it without thinking about it. You can do it on autopilot. And what was once a deficit has now become a skill or a strength. Well, that process applies to anything. However, that said, the right therapy, the right tool, the right modality, the right therapist, the right person can change your mind in an instant. We've all been truth bombed by somebody. So we've all thought one way and somebody's offered us a different way of thinking that's just changed our lives. From personal experience, many years ago, so I'm in my early 20s and I'd just been dumped, probably not for the first time, but by somebody that I was still in love with. So I was moping around and I was basically a pain in the backside because nobody knew pain like I knew pain. Nobody knew heart loss like I knew it. Finally, my friends dragged me out. There I am standing in a pub, head down like that. And a guy come up to me and just went, "Oh, cheer up, mate, it might never happen." And I just went, "Ah, but it has happened, you know." And he was like, "Oh my God." Well, about 5 minutes later, he came back with a drink for me, gave it to me and said, "Look, I know you're hurting at the moment." He said, "But oddly," he said, "what has happened to you is a good thing." He said, "That wasn't the right relationship for you. And although it's painful now, it's much better to experience that pain now than longer down the line." He said, "It's better that 2 people aren't right for each other split up and stay together. It actually frees both of you up to meet the right person. Now, you can't see it at the moment. You're in a room full of opportunity." He said, "But the right person is out there and you'll find them." I was 21, 22, I'm 52 now. That piece of advice has stayed with me my entire life. I'm really good at handling rejection, not just romantic rejection, business rejection, interview rejection. If it didn't happen, it wasn't meant to be. I let it go immediately. I'm very good because of that one night, that one bloke, that one pint. Therapy can sometimes do that. I've had people, they come in, they have one session. I'm expecting to see them for half a dozen sessions, but they phone up and they go, I got that was brilliant. I've got everything I need from that one session. Thank you. Sometimes you're even thinking, I don't even know what I said, but I clearly said the right thing. I truth bombed them somehow, and I changed their entire outlook on the problem. So for some people, it is that process. Plod, 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 from unconsciously incompetent to unconsciously competent. But sometimes something can change your mindset in a moment.
Really interesting. Great story, a great illustration. So thank you for that. So as we sort of bring everything together, I think somebody has summed up sort of just looking at the practical steps that we want to take away. So sort of I've got 2 final questions for you, really. So what practical steps can we take back to our existing workplaces as an employee, as a member of staff, to feel less fatigued and better protect our mental health?
Go easy on yourself. Don't expect to operate at maximum efficiency the first day, the first week, maybe by the end of the first month. But go back just expecting to do the best you can at that time. Not the absolute best, just the best you can at that time. If you feel tired, take a break. If you don't get everything done that you were supposed to that day, don't bring that home with you. Let it go. It will be there tomorrow. The world is not going to end overnight if you didn't finish that thing. It's about being kind to yourself as we come out of crisis.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, and also from comments that I can see, and I do not take it lightly in any way, shape or form. I blame myself as well. I don't think we're kind enough to ourselves. No. And being kind enough to ourselves does not mean not working and making excuses and not reaching deadlines. It's just being a little kinder to ourselves, I think, can go a very, very long way. So sort of wrapping it up for the second question that I said, tips for connecting better with our colleagues in this very strange environment. People are saying a lack of feeling of connection with my colleagues, with my workplace, definitely seems to be contributing to my feelings of fatigue.
Yes.
And I think as we look to whatever the ways of working might be, whether it's a mixture of working, whatever it might be, I think that connection with our team members is a real issue that not everyone is successfully grappling with.
Absolutely. Partly we're constrained by actual factors. We aren't as connected as we would like to be, and our sense of connection is all off kilter anyway because it's online. The simplest fix, the most fast acting fix, pick up the phone. We lose a lot in texts, in emails, but we're so reliant on them these days. And Zooming, we're so busy trying to figure out, our brains are trying to process so much information that sometimes we don't listen. Pick up the phone. There's a connection there that's better than an email, that won't be misinterpreted, and it doesn't have your brain trying to process as much information. Talk to another human being with a phone. Use your voice. Hear their voice. We get so much connection. We get so much meaning, not from actual words, but from who said it, how it was said, the tone, the spaces between the words. And so an email can actually come across as quite abrupt and disturbing. But when you actually talk to them, you think, oh, that was fine. Talk to them.
Yeah, really good advice. Really good advice. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we won't have solved the world's problems today, but I think you've really given a lot to think about. I said at the time that the fact that we have disaster orientated brains is something that I really think will stay with me, because it really resonates with me. Lots of you asking how you can get hold of Daniel. You can look him up online. He's also got a book that's just come out on the 4 thoughts that have bleeped you up. A really interesting book, looking at, as Daniel has mentioned while he's been speaking, the problem is your attitude to the problem, and that seems like a really interesting thought. So Daniel, thank you so much for joining us to start this conversation. Thank you all of you for joining us. Got lots of comments coming in. Thank you, this is really helpful, just starting the conversation. So thank everyone for joining us. Everyone, take a break before your next meeting. Yes, it's 2:45 here in the UK. Wherever you are, hopefully you can take a few minutes break before you get onto something else. But thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to have you on board again very soon.